Well, hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night to you all, DebConf. I will be speaking about what I am looking forward to in reproducible builds. Notably, I'm looking forward to things and I'm looking at things coming up. So,
Vagrant, you're muted again. Okay.
all right. Hello, good evening, good morning, good middle of the night, good afternoon, DebConf. I am Vagrant Cascadian, and I will be talking about what I'm excited about, what I'm looking forward to, what will be forward-looking about reproducible builds. I've been, just a little about myself, I've been using Debian since apparently 20 years now. I've been a Debian developer for almost half that time and been working on reproducible builds for the last few years. What is reproducible builds? I'm not going to go into great detail about this. There have been a number of other talks about this, including one by Holger earlier in the week. But basically, we're looking at how do you verify a path from source code to the binary code that you actually run on your systems. And notably, we want those results to come out bit for bit identical or bit by bit identical, depending on your preference. Technically doesn't matter too much. Probably one of the most exciting things I'm looking forward to during the Bookworm release cycle is verification builds. We want to verify against the packages actually shipped in Debian. Right now, the infrastructure currently just does a build and does another build, and they have some chance of matching what's in the archive, but not necessarily. Why have we not been doing this yet? Well, obviously, it's a bit more challenging than we expected looking with hindsight. Notably, first we had to be able to download the build info files for a given package. We had to download specific and old package versions in order to recreate a build environment that actually matches those packages. And we need a way to actually verify the package. So these things have turned out to be a little tricky. Some of our good friends over at Arch Linux actually are already doing these kinds of things. What are some of the reasons that makes it possible for them to do this? They have the build info files embedded in their package format, so they don't need to come up with some special infrastructure to figure out where to find these files. They have a repository of historic files that can also even has a cool fallback to archive.org. And they have a utility that makes verification simple for the end user. Relatively simple. I think it's a command line utility. I don't know extensively how to use it. So I am jealous of Arch Linux. I want Debian to have these things too. So what exactly have the blockers been? Notably, build info files. We've had bugs open for some years now, and there have been several series of bugs related to this, and notably, at first, the build info files. First, we had to make it possible for the archive to even accept build info files, and at first, it just threw them away. So the build info files are necessary to recreate the build environment. They tell us what's in the build environment that we need to recreate. But at first, we just threw them away, which was not particularly useful. Then we stored them on FTP master in a directory that was only accessible to Debian developers, which was not particularly useful. So not so long ago, or at least what feels like not so long ago, Holger implemented buildinfos.debian.net. We also had a buildinfo.debian.net, which is running concurrently, although it's a little bit less useful for our purposes. Buildinfos.debian.net reproduces the pool structure of the existing mirror. But some buildinfo files may not make it into buildinfos.debian.net, notably long-term support. And I believe security buildinfo files also didn't make it there, although that may have been fixed. I'm not 100% up to date on that. So another major blocker we're looking at is snapshot.debian.org. So in theory, this has all of the packages produced in Debian and shipped in the mirrors for quite some time. But in order to actually use it, there are some problems. Connection dropping happens. This may be some sort of bandwidth constraint issue. There's some bandwidth limits set on the server, whether intentionally or otherwise. There are some bugs looking into that and some people working on that. And the timestamps actually used when you do a build and what mirror the build environment is actually using at that time is only roughly correlated to timestamp. So we needed some other infrastructure to be developed. Thankfully, somebody did some of that work. So metasnap.debian.net is a meta repository that keeps information about various things about the archive. And one of the cool features it has is you can field it a build info file and get an appropriate snapshot date. This helps minimize calls to snapshot.debian.org, which also makes it easier to get the exact, or at least a close approximate of what packages you need to install to reproduce a build environment. But this is still not enough. The bandwidth limits and connection dropping on snapshot.debian.org still will mean to recreate a build environment, it could take a long time. You can use a proxy to minimize the amount of time once, but the first time you get a new package, that's going to cause you some trouble. So we have someone embarking on creating a mirror of the repository, which has basically evolved from just being a simple mirror to a number of other services, integrating some of what metasnap.debian.net did as well. It's a work in progress. Currently, as far as I recall, it has all of the AMD64 binaries necessary to reproduce any package in Buster. Roughly going back to 2017, if I recall correctly. And we plan to have a mirror of this hosted on OSU OSL in the near future, quite possibly as snapshot.reproduciblebuilds.org. And I'm not going to go into huge detail on these two services because there was an earlier talk in this week that was awesome. By the people who have been working on this. So huge thanks to Johanna Schauer, Marin Rodriguez, and Frédéric Perrier. This has been a huge blocker for reproducible builds in actuality. And these people have done amazing work that help make reproducible builds a reality. So an important quality of reproducible builds is we don't have to trust the builders, we can verify it for ourselves. And now that these major blockers have been removed, we're looking at how to actually do verification builds on tests.reproduciblebuilds.org. There's also another tool that has had many iterations over time. I believe the current iteration is being written in Python called DebRebuild. There's also a Perl implementation in DevScripts. But these feel like, maybe I'm a little over optimistic here, but these feel like the last blockers we need to actually start moving forward on doing verification builds against the archive. And so this could lead to my fantasy of having a super inefficient rsync mirror of the Debian repository that only includes packages we've successfully rebuilt. It's a fantasy. We'll see if we get there. Another thing that's happened fairly recently is the fixed file path feature in dpackage was enabled by default. And what this does is it passes arguments to the compiler to strip build paths from the build environment. So, to strip build paths from the resulting binaries it produces. But there are problems with this, most notably, frequently, the command line arguments passed to the compiler still get embedded into the binary results. So I've been working on a patch, and there's been some recent activity on the bug report to do something even better. And I know Doko back in 2018 recommended explore this approach, and I just recently got around to actually trying to. There are some challenges to this process, but I've heard from Guillaume recently, so I'm looking forward. One of the things that this will do is the command line arguments will just have a predictable path in it, and then attempt to extract the build path from an environment variable, which then won't end up getting embedded in the results. So the other thing I'm very excited about that recently happened in Debian is we've basically got nearly the entire essential set as reproducible. There's one package left, and there are patches pending. And even I've heard there are plans to upload a patched version of Perl to experimental, and pretty soon I'm guessing this will land in unstable, and we'll actually see the essential set for the first time being fully reproducible in Debian unstable and Bookworm. So that's pretty exciting. Build essential set, which is all of the packages you necessarily need in order to rebuild. These are the packages that can be assumed to be present, I believe. Most of those are reproducible. And again, I'm really excited because patches are pending for Perl. But there are still some other remaining issues left. binutils ships some log files in the .deb files. We really need to explore some. It's a valid use case. It just breaks reproducible builds. So we need to explore some idea about how to make this kind of information available without shipping it in the .deb files. Something that occurred to me was something sort of like we do for the debug symbols, where it does get uploaded, but it's not in the actual packages. It's some metadata about it. Maybe metadata could be a separate data format that the builds produce, but they're not the actual artifacts that people use on their systems. And unfortunately, GCC ships similar log files too. They're like test suite data, that sort of thing. Stuff that is useful when debugging your system, but not necessarily needed in order to use the binary packages. So, and there are patches. There are a few other things. The documentation for Linux isn't reproducible, but the binary packages that you actually boot are. There are some challenges there, but I think we've made huge progress there. And then, of course, some fail to build. And so build failures are obviously not reproducible. I wish we had more time to focus on build failures because that's a big problem. But the build essential set also depends on a number of packages. So the build essential set has certain dependencies. Currently, 350 fail to build reproducibly or from source. Fail to build reproducibly is something that's fairly easy to tackle. Failure to build from source is a little more challenging, but we need to fix those things. Patches are still pending for Perl, and I've done some targeted work recently, so I've submitted at least patches for at least 30 of the packages in the remaining fail to build reproducibly set. So there's some hope that we can actually get some meaningful subsets of the packages in the Debian archive fully reproducible. And when I work on reproducible builds bugs, I like to focus on these package sets because it narrows down the number of packages I have to look at any given time and helps me focus on just like diving into a particular problem. So that's been fun for me this last year. Another thing I've heard about recently is live images. We've talked about it in general. But recently, Roland Klobos has been doing a lot of work to make live images reproducible, and I think has worked with Holger to actually make some tests running on jenkins.debian.net. Notably, when I wrote these slides, almost all of the images except Cinnamon were reproducible, but when I looked at it just last night, it looked like most of them were failing for some reason. And that's the nature of reproducible builds. We can only prove that something's not reproducible. We can't prove it's reproducible, and it requires constant monitoring and maintenance. But in theory, most of the live image variants are reproducible. Outside of Debian, I was really excited to see NixOS managed to make 100% of their minimal image package set reproducible. I think they have backslidden a little bit since then, but it's another case where reproducible builds requires constant maintenance. It's not a destination; it's a continual reevaluative process. And yeah, I thought I had more slides about other projects. I also am pretty happy about the work that has gone on in F-Droid. We've also seen some work done in Java's Maven Central repository, and these things are all looking... I'm really excited about the future that this holds. But another project which is related to reproducible builds is bootstrappable builds. And that's because if you build your compiler from a compiler, what did you use to build your compiler? That's the basic gist. There's a really cool project that creates a live environment where basically you take a kernel and a reasonably small set of auditable source code, and you get to a fully reproducible bootstrapped toolchain. So this is pretty exciting. Work on this has also been done in the GNU Geeks project, but this new live one really is targeting a very, very minimal set of source code and a minimal set of assumed binaries to be present. So that's pretty exciting. This is kind of the sort of thing that can lead to us challenging the trusting trust attacks, which is really what got me excited about reproducible builds in general. And that's a wrap. Any questions?
Yes, we do have a few questions in the pad. Let me switch here. All right. First one has been answered. They were asking if there's a graph showing the reproducible build success over time, and
Oh, definitely.
someone did provide a link for that. And the second one is what can or should package maintainers do to help with reproducible builds? And what resources are there on learning how to fix reproducible build shortcomings?
Right. Okay. So there are a number of pages that you can use to look at reproducible builds results. If you look at tracker.debian.org, there should be a link to the reproducibility of your package, which should give you information on the last test results for a given package. And so you can see, oh, in unstable, it has these things that look broken, and it gives you a diffoscope output that can help with that. How to fix reproducible build shortcomings. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but the main shortcoming from my perspective is there are some key tool chains that really themselves need to be reproducible, like GCC. So anything you can do to help work on those tool chains would be tremendously valuable.
The third one is, oh, just can you upload the slides and link them somewhere?
Totally. Will do.
And the fourth one is, how about holding an online event for reproducible builds like a bug squashing party?
Let's do it. I'm all game. Yeah. Okay. All right. Looks like there's also a comment that there were some failing jobs that are related to our infrastructure. So relating to the live images. So that's pretty exciting. Oh, PDF generation issues. Yeah. So a number of them are fixed by passing force source date equals 1 if you're using TeX-Live to build your PDFs. They required another variable on top of source date epoch in order to say, no, really respect source date epoch, but it doesn't always fix all of them. So we're working on it. And seems like there's a small conversation going on about this. So yeah, that's a work in progress. Please identify issues. There's a notes repository where we do identify issues and document everything we know about them, linking to upstream projects, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anything else? I'm guessing that's a wrap.
I just realized I've been muted the whole time. Thank you for giving the talk, Vagrant.
All right. And thanks, everyone.